Hey everybody, welcome back to Team Brothership. I literally almost said without parole. That's not my show. But yeah, welcome back. It's me, Mike, joined here again by Bryan from Without Parole. And we are here. This episode will be filling in for the usual Wednesday Shining Force Let's Play because Mark is on vacation and he doesn't have time to play old video games, unfortunately.
Screw you, Mark.
Yeah. And we're also potentially trying this with video this time, which is, I don't know why it's like a big deal. Like Bryan and I were on camera for years, so it's not like some kind of big secret reveal. But yeah, we just didn't do video.
We're also 10 years younger, and we looked way prettier back
That
then.
is true. That is true. Yeah, age has ravaged us. It looks like we've both just been like drinking from the wrong grail for years. But yeah, no. So that was more a cautionary note for Bryan and I. So we remember that we're on camera. We can't like pick our nose or like surreptitiously like lift a cheek to fart or something like that.
Speak for yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I have no control. You can do whatever you want. You can also like see part of Bryan is recording in his lovely studio. I'm recording in my dingy office where you can kind of see my uncleaned shower door in the background there into the bathroom.
Lovely studio.
Yeah.
My apartment has 2 rooms, and this is a cordoned off section of one of them. Like it's not a lovely studio. It's just the corner of a 1-bedroom apartment. But yeah, there's a nice camera and a microphone here, so I guess.
Yeah, you've masterfully organized it so that like the chaos and tumult is like just off screen. Like
yes,
you've got this little oasis.
The pile of bodies is just over there.
Yeah, as soon as we started talking, your cat like got up and left too, and she was just like, "I'm not here for this."
It's weird too, because usually she's an attention whore. She's like, "Oh, you're talking to someone that's not me. Let me come over here and walk over your keyboard for the next hour, right? Just make sure I'm right in front of the camera." Like, when we do Gamescast, all you'll see is just like her tail walking back and forth in front of the camera. So I don't know where she is right now, but I'm sure she'll make an appearance before we're done for the day.
Yeah, no, mine all like they know when they see me sitting in this chair and they hear me talking, they're like, "Oh, he's doing something. He's there for a while." So like it's lap time. Let's pile onto the lap.
Nice.
But yeah, no, I don't know. I got the porch open today too. I was gonna try to record on the porch because it's much nicer out there, and then like all the furniture just broke because it's cheap garbage and won't sustain the weight of like a microphone and a laptop at the same time. So.
You know what you need to do, Mike, is just rebrand and like change the channel name to like Cats and Consoles, right? And so that, because cats, there's nothing more popular on the internet than cats. And since we're both cat lovers, cat owners, it's like why wouldn't we lean into that? That sounds like something that people who don't even care about gaming would be like, these two guys hang out with their cats all day and they talk about stuff I don't really listen to them.
Yeah, well that's okay. That's what I'll do when I'm editing this episode, whether we use the footage or not. I will periodically, this is my promise to viewers, I will periodically insert pictures of my cats doing adorable things, possibly video game adjacent. So you have to sit through the whole episode, otherwise you'll miss the kitty pics.
You're going to be regretting this promise like 10 minutes into editing. You'll be like, this was a bad promise.
No. I'm gonna follow through. It'll be good. It'll be worth it. But yeah, so welcome back, Bryan. We're gonna try to tangentially get on a semi-ish regular schedule. My it's whenever people have time. We'll make this work. But we talked a little bit about when planning. I say in quotation marks when planning out this episode. We talked about an idea that Bryan had mentioned a while ago about. How did you phrase it? It was like gaming gaps or like
blind spots.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good idea because I have a feeling that both of our blind spots are like strongly entrenched in areas where the other one is like really interested. So there is the microphone right there poking into the camera. Hey guys, it's me, Mr. Microphone. Anyway,
if you're only listening to the audio of this, you're really gonna miss out on some of these awesome gags.
Yeah. I know I have to use the video now because
Mike just took his penis out and
Yeah.
was like, "Hey, look at me, it's just a microphone."
yeah, I have to use the video now just to defend myself. I'm not a freak.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think I think our gaming blind spots are like firmly in the camp of like the stuff that the other person is very interested in. So I feel like this will be a good. I mean, why wouldn't it be great? You've been listening so far. This has all been gold. We talk about exhibitionism and broken furniture and cats. It's all good.
Also, the topic itself is a little silly. It's like, hey, we're so passionate about video games. Let's talk about the ones we haven't played.
Right.
What?
Right.
This is the worst topic ever. This is not going to go well. No, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. So yeah, I mean, you had mentioned this a while ago. Like, what were you thinking when you posited that idea?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with this stuff is always the same, right? Because, and I know we've only done like 3 episodes of this, and I think I've already told this story twice. But back when I was buying my real first console after being like a Commodore 64 and PC gamer for so long, I went to what was then Electronics Boutique, and it was my dad and my brother, and the clerk was trying to convince me to buy a Super Nintendo, being like comparing like Ghouls and Ghosts to Super Ghouls and Ghosts, and you know, basically being like, check this out and check that out and blah blah blah, and you get Mario World with this, you get Sonic with Genesis. And I was like, Sonic? I want Genesis. That's all it took, because I was like dumb. I was a kid, and I was stupid, and as much as, you know, there's Sega Genesis defenders out there, and as much as I loved my Sega Genesis, looking back, I can confidently say I missed out on one of the best eras of gaming, because the Super Nintendo was just so amazing. And the big thing I missed out on was not realizing until Final Fantasy VII that I love RPGs, that JRPGs are something that I would like if I gave them a chance. And because the Genesis wasn't really heavy in that area, then I never got to experience all these great Square games. Even Capcom did some RPGs until much later. And then at that point, it's like, well, you just never have the time to really get caught up, right? Because you're not spending an entire summer playing Chrono Trigger, right? Like you would have as a kid. It's like you're just trying to blast through it in a weekend or something with a guide, because you're like, I've never played this and I need to get through it. Ha ha ha. Save states. So basically, JRPGs from the 8 and 16-bit era are a massive blind spot for me. Even though I've gone back and played like Earthbound, and I've played Chrono Trigger, and I've played Final Fantasy VI, but still, it's like there's still so many more. Like it's just an amazing wealth of awesome games. And so I guess the Mike, if your theory is correct, and if one of our blind spots is the other person's forte, then maybe what we should be doing is being like, oh, if you're not familiar with this, here's what you should be playing. Here are the games you need to go back to and check out before anything else. So I guess my question is do you have any recommendations if I was going to play like 1 or 2 SNES games to kind of like start filling in these gaps? What are the 2 that like immediately come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's on some level, I feel like this is going to be a quick conversation because I was assuming like we would have to kind of evangelize each other a little bit, where it seems like you're on board. You're like, no, these are amazing, and I missed out. And
we'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there when we talk about the N64. So somebody out there is going to have to convince me that this is time worth spending.
Yeah. No, I mean it. The ones you talked about are kind of like the big bullet points, like Chrono Trigger.
Good, moving on.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger.
You're right,
Earthbound.
this is a short conversation.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VI. I mean, if you've played those 3, you've kind of hit most of the highlights. But yeah, I mean, I had an experience very similar to yours in that when I was a kid, I remember going to the store with money to buy a Super Nintendo because I was, a big Nintendo kid, and I had a friend that had a Super Nintendo, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going with. And at the time, the clerk actually tried to convince me to buy a TurboGrafx instead.
I love this guy.
Yeah, because they were on sale. They were super, super cheap at that time. It was like a Toys R Us, and he's like, "Oh, if you buy a Super Nintendo, you only get Mario, but if you buy a TurboGrafx, you get this game and this game and this game. Like it all comes free because they're just trying to like clear this crap out." And I remember being like, "Ooh, that is a really good deal." And like, I wasn't like anti TurboGrafx 16. Like I enjoyed. The little bits that I'd played in like a kiosk or something at the mall. Like I liked Bonk, and I liked, what was the other, the Legendary Axe and some of that kind of stuff. But I was like, I don't know, because I'm a little kid and I'm not going to have money again, so like this is going to be it. And like, I know you and I have talked because I think we both got turbos kind of around the same time-ish. And like
I bought a Turbo Duo when I was 21, so after college.
Oh, okay.
So it was much later, right when I think I had PS2 when I got my first Turbo Duo. But man, like that was like such a blast, like going through and eliminating that blind spot, right?
Yeah.
It's like there are blind spots that we've both had, and that we've already sort of filled in, right? And that's sort of the great thing about being a retro gamer, is that like you've got all these opportunities to take time and like basically fix all your mistakes that you've ever made.
Yeah. Oh, if only the rest of life worked that way.
One day.
You're right. But yeah, no. So I got mine in my mid-20s, I think, and I really, really loved it. But I definitely still feel like I made the right call in that moment, getting the Super Nintendo instead of the TurboGrafx, because I did get really into role-playing games around that time. And and there are some real bangers like that generation. Going back to some of the 8-bit stuff can be a little crunchy, but like the 16-bit is like right when they hit that point of like you can tell a coherent story and like the graphics are good enough to be like engaging, but we haven't quite, like, because we don't have CDs or DVDs yet, like we can't just bloat things with tons of filler content. So they were like nice and snappy and like, but still fun. I mean, it seems like you played some of the better ones. I would also, if you liked Final Fantasy VI, I would recommend Final Fantasy IV and V as well. They are not quite as good, but they're obviously, like, all the Final Fantasy games are of a kind in a way, so...
I think when I think about these games and I think about the next one I want to, like, actually sit down and spend the weekend with, or a week with, I start thinking about like the action RPGs, right? Something that's a little zippier, right?
Yeah.
That, like, maybe, so like, I mean, is it like the Secret of Mana games that I should be looking at, or what is?
Yeah, I mean, I also think Secret of Mana is very good. I have kind of mixed feelings about the sequel. What's it? Here, what did they call it? I always heard it as like Seiken Densetsu 3, where now that it's been officially localized, like it does have an actual in the West name, and I'm trying to remember what that is. It's not Heroes of Mana. It's something of Mana. But
not Trials. What is?
Oh yeah, no, you're right. It is. It's
Trials?
Trials of Mana. Yep, Trials of Mana. Okay. Yeah, I have kind of mixed feelings about that game. I didn't really like it as much as everybody else seems to, but I'm willing to give it another shot. Maybe it just wasn't really, maybe it just didn't really hit right for me at the time. It is a little funny that you mentioned action RPGs as like zippier though, because the moment-to-moment gameplay of Secret of Mana might be faster, but Secret of Mana, like, it's a very grindy game. Like, you definitely have to pause every few dungeons to just like sit in front of the inn and like cast like buff spells on yourself for a while, because the Mana games kind of use almost a little bit of the like the Saga game leveling system for magic, in that like your magic doesn't level, like your spellcasters don't just like inherently get better magic as they level up. Like they have to cast those spells a certain number of times. And so especially like towards when you're trying to like max out your magic, like you literally have to cast spells like 100 times on yourself to like level them up. So it's
I don't hate that. I don't
Okay.
like right, but also I think it's good to know what you're in for, which is sort of why I'm asking you these questions,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like I think if you go in with the wrong expectations, if I go into Secret of Mana with an expectation that it's gonna be zippy,
Yeah.
right? Then I'm like I'll probably be disappointed and give up way too quickly. But if I go in knowing, okay, this is what you're gonna have to do, fucking buckle up, then I think it's okay.
Yeah, and I mean the action itself is a little bit like kind of staggered too, because I don't know if you've heard anything or like watched gameplay footage of Mana, but like it's very much like you can attack, but you can't just like, not like Zelda, like go buck wild with a sword combo or something. Like each attack that you do, then like you have a little meter that has to fill up before you can attack at full strength again. So it is almost like turn-based in a way. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. Brief technical difficulties.
All right, Sword of no, Secret of Mana.
Yeah. So those are really good. I think relatedly, one of them that I feel like gets kind of the short shift. Secret of Evermore, I actually think, is a lot of fun, and it's a very...
What's the relationship? Is that in the same series, or is it just a completely different story? What's the deal?
Yeah, it was actually I think the only game designed by Squaresoft's US branch. Like back when Squaresoft was really like trying to make inroads into the US, they created a US branch of, you know, all or primarily American staff. And that was their first game, and they used Secret of Mana and its sort of menu and interface as like a template. And so it's not part of the same series. It doesn't have like the same spells or anything, but it's got the same almost like the same engine. It's not literally the same engine. It was built separately, but it's got kind of the ring menus. It's got the magic and weapon level up system. There's not 2 players, which seems kind of lame. Secret of Mana has actually up to, I think, 3 players you can have. But it's not 2 players, but it does have like the same party system where you've got like the multiple characters that you can switch between, and they each have sort of different stats and abilities.
All right, final question before we move on, because I want to hear about some of your blind spots. Do you lose out on anything if you're playing Secret of Mana by yourself?
No.
Okay.
No, it's definitely a fine single-player game. I mean, growing up, I remember playing it a lot with like my brother or my friends and things, but I think it's a totally fine single-player experience.
Cool. Well, I have homework then.
Yeah. No, those are great games. They're very dynamic.
All right, man. Well, that was that was the most obvious one for me. That's the one that always stands out. Sorry, I got sirens over here like crazy.
That's
all
right.
The whole city's burning down.
Yeah, we were talking about the crime-riddled nature of your neighborhood before we started recording. So
yeah,
sorry.
People are like, "Why? Do you live right next to a firehouse or a police station?" I'm like, "Nope. I just live right next to the murders."
Yep.
All right, what do you got for me, Mike?
So yeah, no, and I know you're gonna have lots of feelings about this. I really want, like, my whole gaming career, I have really wanted to get into survival horror, and I just can't. Like I've tried a bunch of games, and I always end up getting really frustrated, and I always do the same thing where I'm like, oh, all right, I just need a break. I'll come back to this, and then I'm just like, nah.
No, you're doing it wrong. You don't take breaks. You just plow through, force yourself. It's like doing heroin. You just got to inject it straight into your veins. You don't you don't put it in a sippy cup and go, I'll just have a little bit now. You go,
yeah, no.
What is it, Mike, about survival horror? Because you know, if anybody has ever heard my voice before, then they definitely know that survival horror is probably like my favorite genre of all time. So I love it, and I even like the things that come along with it that aren't most people don't like, and I have a feeling I know because of that what you're going to say. But tell me, Mike, What is it about survival horror that just isn't working for you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I can go into more details, but I think ultimately, like, the real meat of it is the survival part. I don't like feeling underpowered and helpless in a video game, because that's how I feel all the time in real life, and like that's not like a fun escapist fantasy for me.
Like when you're Mario, when you're little Mario, you like one tiny little Goomba can take you out.
Yeah,
like what why is this different?
But you can also leave like a streak of Goomba corpses behind. Like Mario's shoes never wear out. Like he never is like, Mamma mia, my feet hurt too much to jump anymore, and then just gets tackled by turtles and killed.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk about specific games then, because like I mean I can't think of any survival horror games where your shoes deteriorate.
No, but like so for example, like Resident Evil, I actually finished my first Resident Evil game a couple of months ago. I played through the remake of Resident Evil 4, and I did have a pretty good time with that one. But I also think, I know from things people have said, it's kind of the least survival horror of the survival horror series. Like
4, 5, and 6 are like this complete weird offshoot where it's just like we decided to go action. It's not that scary anymore. We don't seem to really be limiting your ammunition, so like it takes the survival out of the horror and obviously a lot of the horror out of the horror. So I don't even know what right those games have calling themselves survival horror. But it's still 4 is still a good game in VR.
I'll have to try that at some point.
I would have never played it flat screen. I'm one of the few people that like back in the day when it came out for like GameCube and PS2 and all that, I was like, this looks really good. It's stunning like for the time, but there was just something about the gameplay. I was like, yeah, this is just strays too far from what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is a cool action game, but not so great survival horror.
Yeah, I think so. To kind of set up an example, like I played through a decent chunk of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I sort of enjoyed it for a while, but then as it got sort of towards the middle of the game, like ammo just got real scarce, and like eventually it got to this point where I was in a room that like the AI of like Mr. X, he would never come into that room, so I was safe, but I had no ammunition for anything, and there was Mr. X and I think like 2 zombies right outside the door, and I was just like, I am stuck. Like I cannot survive. Like if I go out of this room, they will kill me. But I'm just trapped. I guess I'm in this room until what's his name drops the nuke on Raccoon City. Like, well, it's the end of Leon. Sorry, everybody. And so it's that feeling of like I can get stuck here. And I remember even with like older adventure games, like I will go back and play the hell out of like all the LucasArts stuff and like even some of the Sierra stuff. But when you start getting into those games where it's like, oh, you missed this item like 3 hours ago, you can't progress anymore, like I won't even touch those games because I don't like to get stuck. And I think that's it always, like when I'm playing survival horror, my fear is less of like a monster's gonna jump out. My fear is like I'm gonna get stuck and I'm gonna have thrown away like precious hours of my very limited life.
With the situation that you're describing with Resident Evil 2 remake, like, I mean, I don't know the specific room that you're talking about or the area or whatever, but like, you know, Resident Evil 2 and all the remakes, like, sort of, they did give you like sort of these like dodge type mechanics, right?
I don't think they introduced that until 3. 3 definitely has it, and I'm pretty sure 4 does too. 4
so
gives
if you run
the...
out of the room, you've got some health on you, right? You run out of the room, it's like, can you just like take damage and then like, you know, push the zombies out of the way and run, and then like just, you know, take some herbs or some first aid spray or something like that, and like, or were you just in a situation where like there's just no continuing no matter what you do?
I mean, I think there was that possibility. I'm like, okay, I could try to like dash out a few times and like maybe try it like 3 or 4 times. Maybe on the 4th time, I will be able to get past them without sustaining enough damage. But then the bigger question is like, I don't know where there's any more ammo. Like I don't like,
right.
I'm gonna walk out of this room. I'm gonna take a whole bunch of damage. I'll maybe make it to like another 2 rooms. If there's not ammo there, like I'm probably gonna get killed by a licker, and then I'm gonna have to reload back to this other room where it'll take me 4 or 5 tries to like. It's that feeling of like getting like I was just kept thinking like there's no way I'm gonna be able to like rebuild up like the ammo buffer that I will need to survive the unforeseen circumstances of this game.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, and that's actually one of the things I do like about survival horror is that you find yourself in, especially when you go in knowing what to expect and knowing sort of your battle plan, and that's to not kill every zombie, right? To make sure you're from the get-go stockpiling and hoarding as much ammo as you possibly can, reserving better weapons for later when you have boss fights, or like when you use the pistol until you absolutely like need to do something else. And so when you go in with that mentality and you're stockpiling stuff, you're going to find yourself in situations where you do have to use a bulk of your ammo, and then you find yourself like really stressing out about the situation that you're in, because you're like, oh, I've used so much health, I've used so much ammo. Am I going to be able to find another room with ammo? And then you like slowly start building that stockpile back up, and you're dodging even more zombies than you were before. And I will say that this is a thing that happens in survival horror, but it doesn't happen that much in survival horror. Like I'm actually surprised that most games like totally eschew the survival part of survival horror, and they go, oh, just here's a ton of ammo, you're gonna be fine. Like, oh, right? It really is like just specific games in the genre that really do that to you.
Yeah, no, and that's why like I've played other ones too. Like I've played several of the Silent Hill games, and it does again always kind of get to that same point where either I'm stuck or I'm just like, and maybe I'm picking bad choices because I'm trying to find ones that are kind of like outside of like the core ones, because I'm like, well, I don't really like these mechanics, but maybe I'll like some of these ones around the edges. But like I'm just making bad choices because I played, what was it? I played Silent Hill: The Room.
Oof.
Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, listen, if you're a hardcore Silent Hill fan, you're still gonna be like, it's all right. Right? Like if you're not already a hardcore Silent Hill fan, it's definitely not one that needs to be on on your playlist anytime soon.
I had read, so you like go through the whole first chunk of the game, and then there's like the whole second chunk of the game is basically like a real long escort mission. And I remember looking it up, and it's basically like if the woman that you're escorting, I don't think can die, but if she takes a certain amount of damage, it will automatically route you into the bad ending, but you won't know. Like there's no indicator that like you'll just keep playing, but you're like locked into the bad ending. And I just remember there would be these rooms that I would go into, and like just things would come out of everywhere and just swarm her, and they're just like punching her like crazy. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I just seem stuck. Like, I'm definitely going to get the bad ending because this woman just got like mobbed.
I usually get to that point in those type of games where I'm like, and I just want to see it through. So give me the bad ending. Let's move this along. Like, I'm very not interested. I think The Room is really, really rough for so many reasons. And I want to say that was a completely different team than the one that had made 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play some Silent Hill games, go play like Shattered Memories or something, which is a great kind of like reimagining of the first game. That is, I think, really well done from like a gameplay and story perspective. Because I did try to play the original Silent Hill 1 not that long ago, within the last couple of years, and I found myself extremely frustrated because I went in with the mentality of like, oh, I'm going to play this like a Resident Evil game, conserve every single bullet, and then I found myself getting attacked constantly, right? Like these flying wing things at the beginning of the game.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like you can't really outrun those, not to the extent that you need to. And so it's like you've just got to turn and shoot and waste ammo. Same with some of the dogs. So going into them, with the same mentality every time, it can ruin it for you. And I think it kind of ruined Silent Hill 1 for me recently. Meanwhile, I think Silent Hill 2 and 3 are really, really well balanced for that kind of stuff. And then 4 just goes off the deep end again. It's like not that great.
I did play Shattered Memories is the one where it keeps cutting back to the like therapist office, right? Is that?
Yeah.
I did play a chunk of that one too, and I think with that one, what I bounced off of was like just again like how powerless you are in that game because you can't do anything. Like you can just run from everybody, and I just remember like. Because I think a part of it is too, you had mentioned a few minutes ago, like you don't shoot every zombie. Like you need to focus on conserving resources. So a big part of that is just like avoiding threats rather than confronting them. Yeah. Where I feel like anytime a game hands me a firearm, I just like mentally instantly turn into like SWAT guy trying to clear a building where I'm just like methodically like, all right, we like poke our head into this room, check all of our corners. All right, there's some bad guys, shoot them. All right, we've totally cleared this area. This is safe. Next room. And I just like, I find it very hard to get out of that headspace because like I always want to make sure I've got like a clear exit route in mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, like that's sort of why survival horror works for me because like you're not ever allowed to feel safe,
right?
Because you say, well, I'm going to deal with this room. I'm going to walk down this hallway, and like, oh, I didn't kill that zombie the last time, so he's going to be here this time, and it's like, well, yeah, but you didn't waste 4 bullets, killing it, and so that's 4 bullets you've got. But now you've got to deal with him every single time you walk down that hallway, right? It's I get the frustration, and I get like the mentality of playing games that way. But like I don't know. I think the horror aspect of it, when you love horror as much as I do, the scales start leveling out and you go, okay, well, I'll take the horror over my need to feel safe in this game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too, like as a genre, I legitimately really enjoy horror. And like, for example, it sort of gets grouped in with these types of games, but I don't think it really is. I love Eternal Darkness. Like, I love that game. Like, that's, potentially one of my, like, top 3 favorite GameCube games of all time. And, like, I really, and it's, like, it's so creepy and weird and, like, and genuinely scary. Like, it's not just, I mean, for me, the loss of resources is, like, it's not scary, it's more like frustrating where like the creepy horror monsters, like that's the part that I really get into.
Yeah, it's actually really surprising what they group in with survival horror. For a long time it just seemed like anything that was horror was survival horror, right? They just like, oh, we've just renamed the genre. It's like, no you didn't. We just got lazy. Instead we're just going to lump it all together. One of the things I've been doing, and not to hijack your segment.
No, go ahead.
But recently, I made a promise to myself that I was going to play through some games that I've always really wanted to play through, and which is, but since we're on the survival horror side of things, I've always wanted to play through Rule of Rose.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've never actually played more than the first hour or so of that game, and everyone goes to bat for it. Everyone says it's amazing, and of course it's like it's ridiculously expensive if you're a physical collector.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm trying not to care about that much that side of gaming as much anymore. I'm trying to, remember why I get into gaming in the first place, which is because I love video games. And so when there's these games that have like such great reputations, like Rule of Rose, more sirens on my end, then it's just, then you're like, why haven't I finished these? Right. And so I just started that up the other night, and then I get distracted by like 1,000 other things. But I've again promised myself that I'm going to, before before October probably rolls around, I want to make sure that I knock out a couple of these classic PS2 horror games that I haven't gotten around to. And I don't even know if Rule of Rose does qualify as a survival horror game. It seems like it's a horror game.
Yeah. Well, kind of going off of your question that you posed to me, what, like, knowing my predilection and interest, like, what would you recommend? So, like, I really liked Eternal Darkness. I actually really liked that game Cursed Mountain for the Wii, which
that was a good one.
Yeah, and that was another one that got like savaged by reviewers, and I was like, no, this is really cool, and it's got that neat like kind of Tibetan Buddhist angle, and like it really leans into that. What would you recommend for like to break through this barrier to get me through into these games? What would you recommend?
Honestly, I mean, So part of the problem is like I'm gonna try to be as obscure as possible because
That's fine.
because the stuff I like tends to be the stuff that like not as many people talk about, and luckily the two that are in mind are to kind of take care of a big problem you're having. The first is Galarians, which maybe you've already played.
Oh yeah, no, I'm familiar with it though. Yeah, I haven't played
Right.
it, but yeah.
Yeah, he plays that kid Rion, who's been like experimented on by scientists, and basically you don't ever have a gun, but you can make people's head explode with your psychic powers, right? And it's like you just like basically get overloaded, and you start walking around like with electricity pouring out of you, and anyone that's even in your vicinity just like explodes, and it's awesome. Like Galarians is probably top 10 favorite PS1 games. I've
Nice.
played through it.
Okay.
Whereas there's games I haven't played through at all or only spent the first hour with. I've played through Galarians like 2 or 3 times now.
Yeah.
It's just great. And so that kind of gets rid of your ammo problem. Although you do again have to learn how like these three different levels that you're managing kind of work, and you kind of do find yourself in situations where you're like, uh-oh, if I don't take care of this level, I'm screwed and the game's just going to end. I'm going to have to go back like 20 minutes and replay the same section. So you do find yourself in similar situations, but for different reasons.
Sure.
But I love it though. So that one is awesome. And then the other one, again, I think you've probably played this one because because it's got great pedigree. Is Kudelka.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't played Kudelka, but I've played all the Shadow Hearts games. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, this being basically the prequel to Shadow Hearts. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like it feels way more Resident Evil than any Shadow Hearts games do, so it takes that same kind of survival horror thing. I think the story in it is actually surprisingly good, and it's just that weird, almost Silent Hill thing where like you're in these really strange environments and no one's acting as if it's all that strange. Like everyone is just kind of like cold and like you're like, oh hey, how's it going? You're like, why don't you care that I'm in your house? Like, why aren't you reacting to this more? Right? It's like these conversations that are happening almost outside of the context, and that makes it even weirder. And so so you got that, and then when combat kicks in, it's turn-based, grid-based combat, and you're like, oh, this is cool. And so you're not you're casting magic, and you're using weapons that that are everywhere. And so I don't think you ever find yourself in the quite the same situation that any Resident Evil game ever puts you in. So I think that solves that problem and delivers an amazing game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely been one that's been on my radar for a while because I did love all the Shadow Hearts games, and I know it's kind of like proto Shadow Hearts because it is that like sort of weird middle ground between a survival horror and a turn-based RPG. But yeah, no,
to your credit, you've played all the Shadow Hearts games, and I've only played the first one.
Well, they're like, especially the second two get very silly. Like they're definitely like,
really,
yeah, they use like the first game has legitimate horror beats to it, where like the second two games, especially the third one, like they're almost comedies. Like there's nothing remotely scary in them. They're like they're like horror comedy. They're like
B movies.
Yeah, they're like B movies.
All right, well, that does not instill any desire for me to actually get to them at this point. But because again, I play these things for the horror, right? It's like I've never actually gotten through Kuon. I've never actually gotten through all of Haunting Ground, right? I feel like I've tried to play Clock Tower 3 like 5 times, and I've only gotten through the first few hours. Like, so there's all of these games that are considered like really awesome survival horror games on PS2. One of my favorite genres of gaming. Why haven't I finished these, Mike? I don't know. And but I do think I know the answer. It's because the PS2 era of gaming was peak gaming. Like when we talked about our episode last week, when we talked about, was gaming actually better, 20 years ago? I don't think gaming was actually better. I think AAA gaming was actually better, right? I think that's maybe what we came around to and finally decided on by the end of the episode. And so and during the PS2 era, you were getting first-party stuff from Sony constantly. The stuff that was considered single A or triple A at the time was coming out constantly. And so, like, I was at the point where I was buying multiple games every week. I was still living at home with my parents, so like all this expendable income, I was buying like 2 PS2 games every week. There's no way you're going to finish those. You're constantly moving on to the next thing, right? So I think that's what happened back then. But like, I've got to rectify that now.
Yeah, no, it definitely was like that was the era where it was the cheapest, and I'll say easiest in quotes because it's a complicated issue, but the cheapest and the easiest to make a game that was like a top tier AAA game.
Yeah, before technology advanced too far, it was like, everything just kind of melded and meshed for the first time.
Right. Yeah. Well, I will definitely take a whack at those. Somewhat similar question. How do the Fatal Frame games function in that regard? Because I that's another one where I've always like, oh, these look kind of cool, and I like the J horror angle and like the
the Fatal Frame games are awesome. Like the thing is I'm very stuck in my ways, right? And so like I love when things are in contemporary settings that are familiar to me, and it's not that I don't love like the Japanese setting or anything like that, but what happens is like I start to lose relatability and say, oh man, I'd love a Fatal Frame game that takes place in my hometown, right? Something that's very American, right? But so and I think the further you get into the Fatal Frame series, the more like Japanese the settings become.
Yeah.
And so, and the more the Japanese lore becomes, and so I love Fatal Frame 1, 2, and 3, but I think my love for them sort of decrease as they go. The first one is great, and if you're looking to get into it, I mean, walking around and like you've got like very limited amount of times to switch in the first person mode with your camera and take a screen grab of something that's happening. Right, it's like almost like these collectibles that help you level up faster, I think. And then like when there's an actual ghost who's attacking you, it's like so you're playing in third person and you're constantly trying to give yourself enough room, switch in the first person, and then use different types of film to attack this ghost by taking pictures of it.
Right.
But it's very satisfying. Like I think it works really well. Dude, those games are great. Have you played the Obscure games, Obscure 1 and 2?
No, I have the those are like the team-based ones, right?
Yeah, but I played Obscure 1 by myself, and then Obscure 2, I don't even know if it has multiplayer. It might, and I just never tried it.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with them. They're almost kind of like they're almost a little bit like a game version of that movie. What was it, The Faculty or something with the?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So lots of good stuff to check out. But yeah, I mean, like if you're interested in Fatal Frame, that might be a good place to start.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, I know you said you didn't, or it helps with the horror to make it more relatable. I mean, for me, it's almost the opposite. Like having the starkly Japanese setting then adds to that feeling of like alienation. Like I'm in some place that I'm not familiar with and I'm not as comfortable.
Way outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, these were my feelings 20 years ago. I'm sure that like, here's the weird thing is that like, people will say, oh, I checked out Fatal Frame Maiden of the Black Water or whatever the
new one,
two recent ones. Yeah. And I've tried and I just can't get into those at all. So I don't know what happened, if it was just me growing out of it, or if it was the series changing too much, or maybe I just didn't give it enough time. But it felt really, really slow to start. I think it was Maiden of the Black Water's the last one I tried.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's the newest one, right? That's.
I don't think so, because I think it was the Wii U one that was Maiden of the Black Water, I think, right? And then the different one got brought to Switch, or was it the same one that got
I
brought
thought
to
they
Switch?
ported it to Switch. I thought that's what it was. It got a Switch port because nobody has a Wii U.
Right. Maybe that's what happened. It's hard to keep up with everything. Gaming is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the ultimate takeaway is that like a lot of our blind spots are more just because like the realities of time. Like who has time to sit and burn through all of this stuff?
Yeah. The I think the big one for me that still remains, because like, there's so many. I think we could go down so many different avenues with this. Like one of the other topics I had suggested was like talking about good games that are trapped on crappy consoles or consoles that no one's ever played or whatever. But somehow throughout time, I've managed to get into all of these video game systems that no one's ever really cared about or played, or that performed horribly commercially, like the 3DO. I've got a really great knowledge of that library. The Jaguar, the N-Gage, man, it's just the Gamecom. Like these are things that nobody cares about. So somehow I found time to get into all of these libraries and check out all the games and play them all. But I haven't found time to actually play the good games that everyone raves about, like on the N64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, most of the rare games, right? The like Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, which I know gets less favorable ratings, right? And so, I don't know. Like, so let me. Okay, I'll ask you this, because I'm guessing that we're gonna be wrapping up here soon.
Yeah, but a little bit. We lost, I think, our viewers. I'll see how I edit it, but we lost a chunk of time just because of technical issues that were beyond our control.
Let me ask you this about the N64 era, because the N64 era to me was always kind of a joke, because I was playing with PS1, and it was like, again, we were just getting banger after banger after banger. And when I look at the N64 library, I'm like, there's 20 must-have titles. But it drops off a cliff after that. It's like, here are the AAA games, the first-party games. A lot of those are unbelievably great, and then there's like no mid-tier games. It just falls off of a cliff, and then most of the stuff underneath that just isn't really worth checking out. And so I have kind of like dabbled in a little N64 stuff, but I've never actually sat down and played like Ocarina of Time, which I know there's better ways to play. Is that something that holds up? Is that something that like I should have my gamer card removed for having not played? Like, where does that game stand now?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest, I'm kind of the same way. Like I was, after having an NES and an SNES and loving both of those, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get an N64 because of course, like Nintendo's the best. And then it just didn't seem like much of anything was coming out for the N64, where like you said, the PlayStation was getting bangers like every week. And I think it ties in with what we've talked about a few times now, in that it was so much cheaper and more straightforward to develop CD-based games for the PlayStation than these big clunker cartridges for the N64, because especially at that time, like cartridges and the components were super expensive, so like you wouldn't make a mid-tier N64 game because you needed it to make you a ton of money to justify the cost of development.
There's on a cover of Electronic Gaming Monthly that's currently sitting in my bathroom. It's just like Donkey Kong's hand with a giant banana on the cover, and it says, the headline is, "Will you pay $70 for Rare's latest game?" or something like that, right? For Donkey Kong Country 64, or Donkey Kong 64, and and meanwhile, the exact same time, you've got games like you've got like $40 games coming out, first party $40 games coming from Sony. Metal Gear Solid must have come out at what, 50, right? It's like, this is a dramatic price difference for and also dramatic quality difference, right? Except for with the exception of a few titles. But yeah, man, like Ocarina is still one that like just sits in the back of my mind and goes, man, you've got to play this at some point, because there are people who will say this is still the best video game ever made, and I go, well, I trust these people to a degree. They've played a lot of the same games I've played. Like, it's got to at least rank in my top 10 if I've played it, but maybe not. Maybe it's too late. Maybe if I try to go back to it now, like imagine going back and playing a Crash Bandicoot game now for the first time, right? It's like, it's not going to hold up. Maybe Zelda does, though, because a lot of Zelda games do hold up.
I will say it holds up in the sense that it is, because I only played through, I had played a chunk of it back when it came out, and I really enjoyed it. And then, but I think that's telling that I played a chunk of it and I didn't finish it.
Right.
Where I did finally play through the whole thing a few years ago, and it was fine. Like it was a very solid Zelda game, but I definitely, I don't think it's like top tier Zelda. Like it's very much like kind of the Zelda. Like it's the template that so much that came after it was built off of. So like it's very solid in that way, but I think they did more interesting things like going forward from there.
I love Wind Waker, man. Wind Waker.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like just
Yeah.
such a beautiful game. More Sirens. It holds up, man. Holds up so well.
Oh, yeah. No, Wind Waker is masterful. That's one that I've actually been thinking, like, why is this not on Switch? Like, they ported all these other Zeldas to Switch. Like, why not bring the best one?
You know they're going to, and they're going to charge $70 for it again, right? Like, or, yeah.
Fine.
Yep.
It's fine.
Yep, it is fine. Like, you know, like I give Sony so much crap for being like, hey, remember Last of Us Part 1 that you bought on PlayStation 3 and then rebought at the beginning of PlayStation 4?
Yeah.
Here we are on PlayStation 5 and we're selling you Last of Us Part 1, like, and we rebuilt it from the ground up, and then I look at it and I go, really, from the ground up, right? And you're charging $70 for this again? But I give Nintendo a pass every time they do it, right? Just because I just feel like their games like reek of quality, and like they are so timeless for the most part. So it is weird that I have a double standard, especially since I love Sony so much more than Nintendo. It's like I actually have a bias against Sony for doing the same thing Nintendo does.
It's the way that, like, you'll get really mad at your family for doing certain things, but like if strangers do it, you just kind of shrug it off because it doesn't hit you the same way. You don't take it as a personal affront in the same way.
It's true.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Like, I have gone back and replayed some N64 stuff, and it just like it's a tough console to go back to. There are some really good, like Sin and Punishment is a genuinely fantastic game that I think holds up really well. What was that? Oh, the game that nobody talks about, Rakuga Kids, the like crayon fighting game. That's a great one.
Yeah, you brought these over for me so I could install them on my Polymega.
I did. Have you played them yet?
I don't even use my Polymega anymore. I discovered that the all-in-one Kin Hank retro console I got from Amazon, I discovered like that thing is so much better and more versatile than I gave it credit for, even when I first got it and loved it.
Yeah.
That I play everything on that now, and so N64 is taking a back seat because there's just 60,000 games on it, and it's like I went back to the Commodore for like a week, the Commodore 64.
Oh, nice.
And it was just so much fun, man, reliving that childhood stuff. And then last night I figured out how to like get Jaguar games on it and Gamecom games and N-Gage stuff. And I was like, this is stuff that just like isn't fun to play on its original console. Like, you know, like the N-Gage stuff, it never looked good, right? You tried playing on that tiny little screen on the N-Gage, but like there's some decent games on there, man. There's an Elder Scrolls game on there, Shadow Key.
Oh yeah.
And it's like to be able to like play those on like a big 50-inch 4K TV.
They're all like pixelated to hell.
Yeah, but I love it, right? Like you've played OG Game Boy games or Game Boy Color games, you know, blown up to full screen, and it's like I love the way that looks. Like, and this is actually something that bothers me. I know this is not the conversation we were supposed to be having, but that's something that bothers me about Sony. Sony's so embarrassed about their PS1, PSP era of gaming that like they refuse to just release these as PS1 classics like they used to. They're so embarrassed about this era, about everything's like janky and the walls, you know, warp and everything's pixelated, that even when you get a game like Jumping Flash on the PlayStation 5, they use like this emulator type thing to smooth out like these edges and give you high definition characters, and it's like they won't even let you turn it off. And everyone says, no, they do. But they don't. They don't. The option that people think turns this stuff off doesn't. And it's just like, man, I just want to play the real game. I want to play the original game. I have a fondness for pixelated graphics and warpy walls and like, you know, like 7 polygons on the screen at a time. Like give me that game. But
yeah,
I don't know.
It's funny. I mean, we can I suppose we can kind of end on this point, but that made me think. One of the other things that I was thinking about for today, instead of this topic, was I was like, oh, what about like games that should have a remake or something on that? And I had heard recently that, like fairly recently, some of the folks who had developed Final Fantasy VI had gone to Square higher-ups and were like, oh, we want to do a remake of this game, but we want to use the, I mean, they was not specifically this, but like basically like we want to use the Octopath Traveler engine for it. We want it to look like that, or like was it the Live Alive remake? And I was just like, I heard that and I was like, oh my god, that would be amazing. But allegedly, this is all alleged, like, Square higher-ups were like, oh, no. Final Fantasy remakes, like, anytime we do a Final Fantasy remake, it has to be, like, super HD, like, lifelike mod. Like, it basically has to be the Final Fantasy VII remake. And I'm just like, come on.
Right?
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but also... then fine, where's our Final Fantasy VI lifelike remake? Because that's also fine. Give that to us. Like,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Well, the thing is,
I played Final
won't...
Fantasy VI. Like, let's do something different with it.
Yeah, no, they won't do that though, because if they're gonna sink that much money into something, it has to be like a Final Fantasy VII or a Kingdom Hearts or like something that's guaranteed to make them, $1 billion.
Right. I miss the old Square.
I
miss Bushido Blade Square.
I do too. That's what can be our next episode. We just play Bushido Blade for an hour.
Nice. Cool.
All right.
I'm gonna die a lot.
Well, yeah, we covered some ground today. We talked about things that I've got some games that I'm gonna have to look into now. I'll check out.
Same.
Yeah, I'll check out Galarians. So
check out Evermore.
Yeah, no, it's really great, and the character's dressed just like Marty McFly from Back to the Future.
Oh, okay. I'm down with that.
Yeah, it's a good look. Well, thank you for joining me again, Bryan. I hope you had a good time.
Oh, you want a response right now? I was going to email your response and be like, it was all right.
Yeah, it's fine. Right. It's fine. We talk about after the episodes. We're like, yeah, it's fine.
It was okay.
It's good.
Yeah, it was
all right.
I hope no one watches this one because it wasn't as good as the next one.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they're always progressively better, so we'll never have any viewers because we're pushing them off to the next episode.
Right. Well, and then people are going to, if anybody actually watches this, they're going to go, wait. These guys want to talk about retro games and have people listen to them, but they've never finished Ocarina of Time?
My God. I have. It's okay. I did. It was fine.
That's not going to be their takeaway from it.
No, it's not. We'll put in a big disclaimer at the end that we love all video games, especially the popular ones.
Right. Especially whatever the person that's listening to this right now, very angry, whatever your favorite video game is also our favorite.
Yes, exactly.
Does that make you happy, you stupid mother? I love the internet, Mike.
Yeah, me too. So on that note, thanks for joining us. We'll be here again in a weekish or so. So until then, I've been Mike.
And I'm still Bryan.
You are. And we will see you real soon. Have a great week, everybody.
That was pretty good.